call this work session to order, if you would please. This is our work session on Anchorage housing presentation. Let's go around and identify ourselves. Starting on that end.
Susan Bison with Housing Anchorage.
Julia Tucker, Assembly Council.
Ernie Hall, Assembly.
Bill Evans, Assembly.
Jennifer Johnston.
Tim Steele.
Good training assembly.
Elby Gray Johnson.
Michelle Brown, Ned Waving.
Mary Jane Michael, Housing Anchorage.
Well, thank you for being here. I'm going to turn time over to you guys.
Okay, we've got a quick half hour, so we're going to be fast.
Okay?
Thank you.
Patrick, we just started. We're joined by Patrick Flynn.
Thank you. As I said, I'm Michelle Brown with United Way of Anchorage, and we are here on behalf of Housing Anchorage. Housing Anchorage came together as a collaboration of a number of providers, and you can see them here, because each of us in our work have been finding that we are experiencing a hampering of our work because of a persistent lack of available and affordable housing. Housing has become an escalating and persistent barrier to business growth, financial stability, and quality of life. And these are the organizations who are on this collaboration. I'll just quickly introduce you to a few of them. Tyler Robinson from Cooking with Housing, Ron Pollitt from ACDA, Chris Perez from the Rasmussen Foundation, and Chris Schutte from, he is wearing two hats, AEDC's Live Work Play and the Anchorage Downtown Partnership. When we came together, because of our collective experiences, we set out to first assess how big is this problem, what is the nature of it, what's causing it, and then most importantly, what can we all do collectively about it. And I'm going to turn this over now to Mary Jane, who will share with you some of what we've learned about the supply, the demand, and the affordability of housing stock in Anchorage.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on demographics of Anchorage because I think we found some interesting things. We've seen steady growth, but since 2000, we're slowing down a little bit, primarily because of the shift to the Matsu borough. In 2013, for the first time, we reached 300,000, and it's expected in 2022 we'll be at 327,000. Next slide. Although our overall growth rate is expected to be slow, our senior citizen population continues to grow. In 2011, the first baby boomers turned 65, and this year the last baby boomers will turn 50. Today, Anchorage has more than 22,000 seniors, and the tsunami of seniors is expected to dramatically increase to 44,000 by the year 2022. So I think more people are starting to think about Anchorage as a place of retirement. Household types. In 1960, near the peak of the baby boom in the 60s, Anchorage households were primarily married couples with children under the age of 18. Many of us were moving here around that time. Today, they represent less than a quarter of the Anchorage households. There are more one-person households today than there are married couples with children. This is significant because it impacts the type of housing we look to for the future. Yes.
That's that slide.
Back to this slide.
The married single parent. You don't have just married, right? Oh, families no child. Okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay. This graph shows that 2 Anchorage households in 5 are renters. That's roughly 65,000 homeowners and 41,000 renters. So how many in the room have ever been a renter? So what it says is that, the need for rental housing in our community is really great. Next slide. Most people who rent are relatively young. As you can see by this slide, under 25 is 86%. After age 35, typically there are more owners than renters. But one caution is that national projections anticipate that in the future, we're going to see an increase in the number of renters because many new jobs have relatively low wages and many young people have large student loans to pay back. types of occupied housing units. The pie graph on the left shows that 85% of Anchorage owners occupy housing are single-family homes, and that's no surprise. In many cities, rental housing is synonymous with dense multifamily housing. But in Anchorage, more than a quarter of our rental households live in single-family homes. Nearly a third live in duplexes, triplexes, and fourplex buildings. Only 15% live in units that are 20 units or more. Next slide. Age of housing units. Much of our inventory, no surprise, is becoming old and obsolete. Adding up the wedges on the left side of the pie, it shows that half of our housing is 35 years or older, and only 1 in 5 units is 45 years old. And 10 housing units were built before, 1 in 10 were built before 1960. Sorry, that was a tongue-tire there. You've seen this report. This municipality produced it March 2012. And this study forecasts that we're going to need 18,200 homes by the year 2030. New housing units by type. This graph includes Eagle River and Girdwood, and it shows how dramatically housing construction has declined in the last 6 years. We were not significantly affected by the lower 48 housing collapse in 2008, but we do believe that some of the factors affecting the decline in our housing development are that inexpensive, easy to develop land, we're finding less of it, construction costs are up, and there's certain types of available financing that are not conducive to the types of housing we'd like to see developed. Of the 18,200 new homes needed, we need about 909 annually. You can see from the graph that we're pretty much below that level. We're only building about 350 a year. And the only time in Anchorage history that production was this low was after the collapse in the 1980s. Back then, the oil prices were $11 a barrel, interest rates were 10% plus, and we actually saw a decline in our population. This is new housing units actual versus needed. The biggest shortfall, as you can see, 72 was constructed in 2013, and we needed 418. As a result, the housing shortage it's much more severe for multifamily probably than the single family. Nearly all of the multifamily being built are low-income tax credits. So those are rent-restricted types of units. But they are not nearly enough to meet the demand. More multifamily units are not being built because the cost of construction exceeds the amount they can receive for rents. It simply doesn't pencil. The next slide is the average apartment vacancy rate. Based on the annual rental survey done by the Alaska Department of Labor for Alaska Housing Finance, it shows that beginning in 2010, our vacancy rate dipped significantly lower than the 5% level, which is typically a healthy supply of rentals.
Go ahead. When you refer to apartment vacancy rate, does that include, you said the majority of renters are renting single-family homes? Is that or is that just literally apartments?
This would represent, this is the average. So it
It
would include single
homes in
family.
the vacancy
Yes.
rate. But there are no subsidized units in that.
Oh.
So the subsidized housing isn't even included in the vacancy rate.
And we're starting to hear stories now about people paying realtors to find them rental housing. So the next slide is the MLS home listings for May. The current inventory of housing for sale is the lowest we've seen in the last 30 years. The average days on the market for units sold in the last 13 months is 48 days. And we're hearing stories of multiple offers on any one home. Affordability, not surprising, the low vacancy rate has caused a significant upward shift in the cost of rentals since 2008. Rents are rising, but not at a rate that makes constructing multifamily rental housing feasible. Anchorage apartment rents, you can see in efficiencies about $850, a one-bedroom, $1,100, two bedrooms, $1,300, three bedrooms, about $1,450. Anchorage gross rents as a percentage of household income. To be considered affordable, housing costs should not exceed 30% of a household's gross income. In 2012, if you look at the orange, the yellow, and the green wedge, and you add those together, you can see that 46% of renters are spending more than 30% on housing, and 1 in 5 households is spending 50% or more on housing. How many minimum wage workers to afford a one-bedroom apartment? The minimum wage in Alaska's general election is scheduled for the general election ballot in November. We're supposed to go from $7.75 to $9.75. I don't know if you read in the paper, Seattle just passed a $15 an hour minimum wage. Again, based on paying no more than 30% for housing. You look at the graph, in the year 2000, it would require 2.1 minimum wage workers to afford a one-bedroom apartment. And today it takes nearly 3. Average home sale prices have been modest because most sales are on existing units, not new construction. Anchorage is lucky that we didn't see the impact of the national housing price collapse in 2008. We've held pretty steady. Our challenge is that there are less than 5 builders who have built more than 100 homes in the last 6 years, and they are primarily pre-sold units that are being constructed. Homes and condo prices, income needed for a condo is $60,000 for a $200,000 condo, income needed $85,000 for a $350,000 home. Good availability of housing. A recent household survey of Anchorage residents found that 48% said there was not good availability of homes for sale, and 56% said the rental market was inadequate. And another survey done with local businesses was the AEDC Business Confidence Index, and it found that 58% of employers surveyed said that the housing market was affecting their ability to retain and recruit employees. And lastly, we do have some bright spots in our community in response to the high demand. West Park, you may recognize it. It's one of the last large subdivisions. It was the 250-acre gravel pit out in Sand Lake. Some older homes are being redeveloped. This was a single-family older home being developed into a duplex. That's an example of a tax credit multifamily unit, and this is a proposed market rate multifamily rental property being proposed. Even though we have these kinds of works underway, it's simply not enough to meet the market demands of our housing. Jim?
I see that West Park. What about all of the south, the Carr Godstein property off from Platt and that's not fully developed out yet, is it?
No. Do you know which one they're talking about?
Yeah, I do. I don't know the acreage in there, but much of it is developed. I mean, this was the last large really vacant tract to be developed. But I don't have a number on that. I know
I can find
increasingly
out.
they're building.
It might be worthwhile, because I actually think there's still a lot.
I was thinking there was a few more.
There's
Yeah.
some, there's some, but not.
Yeah, and
Not
also
250.
for multi-residential.
And with that, I'm going to turn it back. Oh, I'm sorry.
That one you've got, that's the bottom right one, the proposed one, market rate, they were telling us they expect about $1,800 a month.
That's correct. And they're hoping for 250 to 300 units. That was a redevelopment. It had 50 units on the site, and they're going to tear those down and add. But we're looking at net. So if they take 50 off, that's 200. Right? We lost
What happens to like the developer that wants to build off of Boniface, he wants to take out a trailer court, 100 trailers in there and wants to put in market rate apartments? How to deal with that issue? Because for the people, those trailers are what they could afford, and the rent's $426 a month. Now they're being told, well, you can move out of there, and we're going to build, it's going to be about $1,800 a month. That's going to drive the prices even up higher, do some affordable housing.
Right.
Should we go back to trailer courts in Anchorage as an option if we have the land to do it? I mean, for a time in Anchorage, people got trailers.
Right.
We don't do it anymore. Is that somewhere we need to look at, getting zoning areas for trailers? Or
Well-
just drop it?
Trailers, the mobile home parks today, the zoning on them is not for multiple, it's mostly zoned R2. So most of them are requiring zoning to allow them to do larger, more dense developments.
Thank you.
And if I could speak to your point in just a minute, I mean, in short, what we're finding is that there is just this acute shortage of housing along the entire housing continuum, from subsidized and market-based, multiple family units and single-family units, except at the very highest level. We do have enough houses over, what, 750,000. So Anchorage currently has this major housing production problem and a major affordability problem. And I want to be clear that affordability is far more pervasive and affects far more than just the homeless population or the low-income population. Only 7 of the 25 most common jobs available in Anchorage now can afford housing at the current rental rate. So this is a pervasive community-wide problem. And as Mary Jane said, production has significantly dropped because projects are just not penciling out at what people can afford to pay, particularly in the multifamily units. This has led to what we call housing gridlock. No one is moving along the normal housing continuum that people do in a healthy housing market, and that is impacting current residents, it's impacting business, and it's certainly impacting projected growth. There have been over the years many studies, plans, conversations, ideas to fix this, but response has been left ad hoc and diffuse. The issue is really bigger than any single population, any single project, or any one agency or entity can do. But that's the way that, as a community, we've been approaching it. And so we in the collaboration believe it's time for us now to pool our efforts and make an intentional, concerted set of aligned strategies that will help us turn the curve on this production issue and affordability issue. And there is no single fix. There's no magic bullet here. There's no one thing that's going to turn this around. But we need to be far more intentional in how we set about a series of strategies. For instance, you raised one potential. Should we be looking more at mobile homes? There's going to be a series of strategies on design, on finance instruments, on incentives, on policy, and on regulatory approaches. And when all of those are in place, we can actually start turning the curve on these issues. We have work groups engaged in various aspects of this, identifying what are the most likely levers that will make a difference and prioritizing those strategies for the ones that will have the most impact. These groups have an impressive number of local folks, developers, planners, all kinds of local expertise, and they are working really hard on addressing this. So this is what we hope is the first conversation with you all, and we would love to hear from what you're hearing from developers, buyers, and renters. And we would love to continue working with you as our work groups come up with strategies that can then be vetted with the community about what really is the concerted list of strategies that really rely on each other. You have to have financing strategies, but you're also going to have policy ones that work together to truly make enough of an impact that no one project, not even 10 projects, can do. So we want to get this dialogue started, and we would love to be working with you as we vet these ideas. And I don't know if any of the other members of the collaboration want to add.
Jennifer had a question for you, I think.
Yes, and we kind of talked about it last week, but one of your committees, you said, is data, that you are, because as you know, we are in this experimental year for Title 21 between the old code and the new code. And so is your data committee, is it robust? Does it include the Home Builders Association? Does it, I mean, is it, because unless we know what we need to fix, and I think Title 21 is probably your largest policy issue that each of us have, can have immediate impact on if it's done correctly. So I hope you have, who is on that committee?
Chris chairs that committee, and we have, and I don't know if you want to talk about that committee, but we also have committees that are working with developers and planners and so on, so we have a long list of names who are working on it, on the issue generally.
But, you know, it's like amount of time for permits, what's holding them up, what is, I mean, I do know that with the city, until we get everything digitally loaded, that's gonna, I know that's what, but also what we're asking and what restraints are we putting, because this is, I mean, I almost feel for our purposes, that's probably your largest.
Do you want to address the data collection?
Yeah, and we've been working with, we have, actually in our committees, we have Andre Spinelli and Peterson, and we've engaged other people, other developers, even tax credit provider developers. We are looking at all the building permit data. We've been working with the AEDC on putting together that information as well as other data, but we're looking at the information. One thing we have found is very few people are choosing the new code. They can pick between the old code and the new code. Almost no one short of Cook Inlet and that last project we have here on Widener's large multifamily, they're looking at the new code versus the old code. And most developers are going with the old code.
And it would be helpful to find out why.
We are cataloging.
Yeah, we're working on
We're
that.
actually cataloging that.
We had a session on that last week.
And then, you know, you bring up some of the builders, and one of we weren't affected by 2008, but we were by the financial institutions, because most builders lost their bonding and lost their letter of credit. So that was what contracted everything, and that is also what is probably, so I'm sure you have finance folks on your committees, but they will be telling you that is slow to be repaired. I mean, that takes a while.
And they're looking at actually some creative solutions to address that. And we have set these goals to drive our action, keep us focused on what are the strategies that are most likely to move these goals. And so those are the gist of.
And also in your data and in your discussions, both with the financial houses and the developers and builders, collecting data on mixed use, because we changed the rules of that around town, and how that's affecting, and is it, at this point, is it more attractive or less attractive? And is it more or less attractive because of the market or because of something that the city has done? I mean, these are all, I think, the meat of the matter.
If anybody forgot, Mr. Chair of the Title 21 Committee. Mr. Steele, you had a question?
I did. You know, you asked what we're hearing. I'm hearing desperation from those folks on the lower end. Some of the retired people on fixed income. You adjust the minimum wage, that is going to help them. And especially in the mobile home parks where the owners say, well, you know, we'll move it for you out to Matsu. They're probably not going to be able to afford it out there even, but usually the mobile homes are in such shape that you can't move them. And there's no option. I mean, they're literally one step above homelessness. And I don't know not only what we can offer now, but what can be offered in the near future. There does not seem to be a solution. And I get calls from people in West Anchorage. I get calls from people in Midtown. But we've got tons of trailers throughout the municipality, and we collectively have to find some solution for it. Or we're going to have.
said, and one of the reasons why we really are focusing on what will incent production and what will reduce barriers to production along that entire continuum, because what we found is a large part of the low-cost rental units are not necessarily held by people of the lowest income.
Yeah.
They're held by people who would, in a healthy market, would have moved up and freed those units up. And that's why
Well,
we call it gridlock, because no one is able to move, and, you know, and then end up owning until you become a senior, and then you want to start downsizing again. Nobody is able to move.
Maybe the only thing available to these folks are like a rooming house, or, you know.
We have 3 questions in 3 minutes. So,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Ray Jackson, Mr. Hall, and Mr. Johnston. So-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, I'd like to thank you for this presentation and your efforts to deal with our house insurance in our community. I think your goals are really great. But my question is, do you have any ideas on how you're going to reach goal number 2? And I know this is going to be a community effort, but that's my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
What we're focusing on there is, at least right now, is that production. And if there can be more and more units on the market, and the market then starts adjusting prices accordingly because there's not such high demand for the few units, that will help reduce that burden.
Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
I'll be very quick. Number one, I think there's a lot going on in the community right now to address this. AEDC, Live, Work, Play, got a group chaired by Carol Gore and Tim Potter that's really working to try to find some solutions. Ms. Johnson Widener tells me the reason that they're using the new Title 21 is it's to their advantage to use that. There's an upside to it. I think a lot of people are staying with the old one because it's what they know, but they've taken time to look at it. And
we need to know why.
Right, exactly. So I think there's a lot going on, and we got a meeting following this one that could have a terrific amount of impact. So, you know, I think we're looking at doing the right things. It's just, unfortunately, we can't do it overnight. But I think everybody is seriously engaged in this, recognize the problem, and I think you're absolutely right. The low-cost housing is there. It's just people are paying too much for it.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Ms. Johnston?
Just a quick, this is kind of a wild card question, but Chris, you maybe could help me. We have the lofts downtown. Do we know what percentage occupancy those are? Because that's a new type of housing that we haven't had in the past.
Sure. The lofts is a mixture of rental housing, of income limited housing, and also of corporate leasing. So there's a significant number of those units that are leased by companies, and they shuttle employees in and out. The hotel is still, the lofts are still under construction, so they have not built out all of the room capacity in it yet. But of the room capacity that's available, when we were there for a site visit 2 weeks ago, I think they were at full. If not full, very, very close.
Anything else before we wrap up?
Thank you very much for your time.
Michelle, Mary Jane, good to see both of you. I think this is a good lead into what we're going to talk about in the next couple hours. So thanks, everybody.